It's production time. I'm Reid Stefan, Realest puppet in the game. Today, I'm sharing how to add a subwoofer to your home studio. I'm covering everything from speaker placement, wiring, settings, levels, room calibration, and more. Plus, a before and after listening example to hear the difference a sub makes in your setup. And at the end, I'm discussing my top reasons as to why a subwoofer might be right for you in your home studio, so feel free to use the timestamps below to jump straight to whatever section you're curious about. And a special thank you to Guitar Center for kindly letting me borrow the Neumann KH80 DSP speakers and KH750 DSP sub for this demonstration. First, what does a subwoofer actually do? Most studio monitors, whether they're large or small, have a difficult time articulating extremely low frequencies, anything around 50 Hz or below, like those deep 808s in hip-hop music or low subkicks in electronic dance music. That's where a subwoofer comes in. A sub is basically an extra-large mono speaker specifically designed to project those deep frequencies you feel in your chest, giving you a more full perspective of your entire mix. Scientifically speaking, a subwoofer goes boom boom in your room. Now that we understand what a sub does, let's begin by adding a subwoofer to our home studio. As I said, I'm using the Neumann KH750 DSP, which is a 10-inch powered studio subwoofer that pairs perfectly with the KH80 DSP speakers that I have on my desk. You can find this sub at Guitar Center for around $1,750 or get the complete package with 2 speakers and the ML1 measurement microphone for under $2,800. The measurement mic is useful for the built-in room calibration and DSP that we'll touch on later. This sub features a control panel on the back for both analog and digital signal processing options, and we'll go through this once we get everything connected. But first, we gotta place these speakers and subwoofer correctly in our room. If you have a rectangular room, set up your desk in a way where your speakers are projecting across the longer distance of your room. Especially when it comes to low frequencies, you wanna give your subwoofer as much space as possible. Next, let's set up our top speakers. Position them so that no matter how far you sit from your desk, they create an equilateral triangle with your listening position. Imagine you're looking from a top-down perspective. It should look something like this. Generally, with smaller speakers, you tend to sit a little bit closer, and with larger speakers, you tend to sit a little bit further away. So having them right here on top of my desk is the perfect distance. As far as speaker height goes, you want to measure the distance from your ears down to the floor to see how high your speakers should be. That should be right around the center of your speakers between the upper and lower cones. You don't want to have to tilt your speakers upwards or downwards because that's going to increase unwanted floor and ceiling reflections. You want your speakers at a perfect height where they can be facing straight out towards your face. No matter what speaker size you're using, you ideally want your desk pulled off the wall a little bit for both acoustic reasons and just the convenience of accessing behind your gear. Next, add your subwoofer below your desk, positioned so the cone of the sub is aligned with the cones of your top speakers. This position ensures there's no misalignment in phase between your top speakers and sub. If it's blocking your legroom under the desk, you can always move it slightly left or right to one side or the other without any huge issues because bass is generally omnidirectional and it won't sound off-centered even if your speaker is slightly to one side. Now that our speakers and subwoofer are set up correctly in our space, let's connect our audio interface to our speakers. I'm using the Neumann MT48, which is one of my favorite sounding audio interfaces for its high quality digital to analog converters. Simply use XLR cables to connect the left and right audio outputs of the interface to the left and right audio inputs of the subwoofer. Next, use another pair of XLR cables to connect the left and right top speakers to the left and right outputs of your sub. I appreciate how these Neumann speakers face the cable inputs downwards instead of outwards for a cleaner look on your stands. Now all of your audio goes out of your interface, through the subwoofer first, then to your top speakers. But these Neumann speakers take it to the next level with digital connectivity too. This allows the speakers, subwoofer, and the interface to communicate together using a couple Ethernet cables and accessories that are sold separately but really affordable. First, I've got 4 standard Ethernet Cat6 cables that are about 6 or 7 feet long. One in the left speaker, one in the right speaker, one for the subwoofer, and one for the audio interface. Then connect the other ends of all 4 cables to an Ethernet switch, like this basic TP-Link 5-port switch I found for 20 bucks. This comes in handy later when we measure and calibrate our speakers. Now that all of our analog audio cables and digital data cables are connected, our final signal flow should look something like this. The red lines are audio outputs, blue lines are digital data, and the green line is an audio input. Finally, connect your power cables to all 3 speakers and switch them on. Now let's loop a beat in our DAW and slowly turn up our audio interface's speaker output so we can hear some music playback while we dial in our settings and controls. Some of these options can be found on any brand subwoofer, and some of these are specific to the Neumann speakers. Starting with bass management. I use this set to active. It allows us to access, customize, and control all of our crossover network and room calibration settings. Subwoofer phase, I keep set to 0 and 180 degrees. These are the settings you want when you have the luxury of placing all of your speakers in the perfect equal distance from your listening position. But if your subwoofer is set way back or way forwards compared to your tops, maybe you'll want to try a different setting based on your specific positioning. A good way to test the phase alignment is to play an 80 Hz test tone and flip this switch to make sure it sounds louder with the 0 and 180 settings. 80 Hz matches the crossover frequency that your sub uses to separate the bass signal from everything else. And you can see that listed here on the chart. Next, subwoofer gain. Now this is something that could be your own personal preference, but I like it between -7 and -10 dB. Get some music playing and then turn it up so it just slightly fills in the low end without over-exaggerating your bass and potentially clouding your judgment. And for the dB SPL output level switch, I like to keep it in the middle at 108. Below, we have the digital audio inputs and outputs, but these aren't getting used in this setup because I'm doing everything with analog cables, and there's a good chance you are too. Our control mode is set to network because everything's connected to our Ethernet switch to communicate digitally for its calibration and correction profile data. And channel B input mode is set to stereo to pass the corresponding left and right audio to the left and right speakers. Low shelf controls the amount of bass you're reducing from the top speakers when your subwoofer is in use. I personally keep the reduction at 0, but I could see this feature being more helpful for people who bump their speakers at high volumes. This could help you avoid overloading these 4-inch speakers and offload some of that bass pressure to the sub. Finally, input ground lift. I keep this connected as a safety measure against any unwanted buzzing or noise. And if that's something that you're hearing, this would be the first switch I would adjust to try and fix that issue. And that's all my subwoofer and top speaker settings using the control panel on the back of the Neumann KH 750 DSP sub. Now that everything's connected, let's take a listen to our speaker system before and after adding the subwoofer. We're going to be listening through my Neumann TLM49 condenser microphone plugged directly into my Neumann MT48 audio interface. Let's hear just the top speakers without the sub. Now, let's add the subwoofer. Hey! That was a huge difference. At first, it felt like the KH80 DSP speakers were slightly underpowered for this huge studio space. But after engaging the subwoofer, this speaker setup immediately felt impactful and more realistic to how my mix actually sounds. A sub absolutely helps these small speakers sound powerful and punchy in any large room. And obviously, this setup would also be banging in a smaller studio space, but I always like to stress test things in a larger room to see how they hold up, and this setup definitely passes the test. Even though we're already sounding amazing, there's a whole nother calibration procedure with the Neumann MA1 measurement microphone, so let's take our sound to the next level. First, download and install the calibration software, which in my case is the MA1 Automatic Monitor Alignment app. Then follow the on-screen steps to set your mic's gain and positioning as your speakers produce various test tones and frequency sweeps that sound like this. It'll ask you to move the mic left, right, front, back, up, and down, and the entire procedure takes less than 10 minutes. And when you're finished, you're left with a custom EQ curve to match and flatten any dips or resonances in your studio space, like this. And now that our speakers are calibrated to our room, let's hear the entire sound system before and after correction. Let's start before correction. And after room calibration. can definitely hear the sound being slightly flattened, and the vocals feel a little bit more present in the mix, which is ideally what you want when producing, mixing, and mastering. But regardless of whether you do this extra step to correct your speakers or not, you'll still need to spend about the same amount of time familiarizing yourself with the new sound of your studio. So now that we've customized our sound and heard the difference, let's talk about who exactly would benefit from a subwoofer. If you're watching this video, you're possibly about to purchase your first subwoofer, or maybe you just got one, so here's some pros and cons to consider. Pro, you get to hear those deep bass frequencies in your music way clearer than ever before. Con, your neighbors also get to hear those deep bass frequencies clearer than ever before. So I hope they like it. Pro, your small speakers will never feel underpowered or too quiet in any big room. These compact desktop monitors can easily fill this huge studio space when paired with a subwoofer. Con, in terms of space and square footage, you lose significant legroom around your desk when you put it in that ideal centered position. But as I mentioned earlier, bass is omnidirectional and you can put it off to one side with no audio issues, but I personally love the look of symmetry and keeping it centered in my desk. Pro, music always feels louder with a subwoofer. Therefore, you'll be way less likely to excessively blast your speakers and damage your hearing over time. Now that's a big one. Con, if you use your subwoofer too loud, you may unintentionally be clouding your judgment when mixing or mastering. If your mix constantly sounds thin everywhere you listen, it's probably because your subwoofer is too loud and exaggerating your actual bass levels. Overall, I'd recommend a subwoofer to your studio if you mix bass-heavy music like hip-hop, EDM, pop, metal, or any other genre that you want to feel punchy and rich with a low end. But regardless of whether you choose this exact Neumann setup, or go with whatever brand matches the speakers you already own, adding a subwoofer truly adds a fuller perspective to your music making experience. So there you have how to set up a subwoofer in your home studio and why it helps. Special thank you to Guitar Center and Neumann for kindly loaning me this setup to test and teach you guys all about bass. I'll include links to all the products that you see on my studio desk in the description below, and catch you guys next time in another video.